Welcome back to Protected Trust Live. My name is Steve Goodman, training coordinator at Protected Trust. Joining me today, Javier Pereira. And Javier, your job title here is project manager, but you actually do a lot more than planning projects. In fact, you're the guy we go to when we have to explain technical things to technical people. But today we're going to explain technical things to non-technical people.
All right.
Are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for it.
Perfect. So in our last live stream, we had Ingram, our CEO, on, and we discussed our last pillar, which was stay secure.
Okay.
And we spent a great deal of time talking about multi-factor authentication in that one. And so instead of talking about it, I thought it would be a great idea to use this live stream to demonstrate multi-factor authentication.
Sounds good.
There's a lot of, I think, confusion that goes on when you introduce a new element into people's lives, like multi-factor authentication. And it's really simple when you just use it.
Yes.
Is what I found. I mean, you've been on site and you've deployed multi-factor authentication. Do you have any feedback from our customers once we've deployed it?
Like all security, it's really kind of, it's like a sliding scale, right? So as security goes up, so does administrative overhead. And as long as the expectation is set, this will make you more secure. You will have to do one more thing. There is one more widget that you'll have to press to get through this particular step. Now, the concept of multi-factor and really kind of the widespread adoption of it is nothing new. Really, 2010, 2011, it was almost required for a lot of the banking industry. If you were in the financial industry, you really did it a lot. When you interacted with the bank and you'd like check scanning and whatnot. So the concept of I have this fob, I see this little number, put the number in, that's kind of already ingrained, right? So now it's not so foreign, but a lot of people still see it as kind of an obstacle because the one thing is I'm willing to accept it here in this banking thing. Why should I do it for email? Why is it so important? But as technology advances, right, what has value is our information. Mm-hmm. So Microsoft has done a pretty good job of making it pretty painless to get yourself through there with some back-end stuff, some front-end stuff, lots of options to choose from. So that's kind of the high-level analysis of multi-factor. But giving the customer a choice and just kind of walking through different steps and going through it with them really helps. I never, ever advise you to say, we're going to move to 365, we're going to move our email, we're going to start, and then multi-factor on the first day. Unless you're a technical professional, that's not good for you. Because you're already going to you'll be timid about, am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong, I can't get in, what if I can't get in? So yeah, definitely adoption and setting expectations. Hey, there's a few steps, let me walk you through it, let me make you feel comfortable. And then adoption is pretty good. Yeah.
We rolled it out internally last year, and we made a written document for people. And what happened was the steps were so easy and so intuitive that they skipped over all the language that was in the document.
All the words says, do not do this.
Right. Well, so the purpose of the document was to say we have a preferred way that you use multi-factor authentication. Because, as we'll see in a second, there's different ways using your mobile device or using your desk phone that you can use to use that second factor authentication. And so people would just use the first one that they saw, and it's actually the most difficult when you have to re-enter in your password because it involves getting a text code, and then you have to re-enter that text into something, and what if you're on your phone while doing it, then you got to switch out the apps. So we have a preferred way to do it. That's the way that I want to show today. So if we go to my desktop here, I'm signed in as an admin for a test organization that we have.
Right.
And so what the admin sees when they go to turn on multi-factor authentication for a user, first they find the user, and they'll click on Manage Multi-Factor Authentication. And this will bring up, well, as you know, but I'm going to explain it to you like you don't
know. Explain it
to me anyway. They see everyone who has it enabled and everyone who doesn't have it enabled. So before the stream, I enabled Alex Wilbur. And you'll see some people it says enabled, some people it says disabled, and then some people it says enforced. Disabled means, obviously, multi-factor is not turned on. Enabled means that it has been turned on, but the setup's not complete. And then enforced means the person's gone through the setup and everything's working fine.
That's right.
So for Alex, And I think what we'll do later is show a fresh setup. I just didn't want to enter in my phone number for everyone to see, so that's why I did it ahead of time.
Call you for a good time.
Right. So we'll sign in as Alex, right? And this is what people would do. They would receive a prompt in Outlook once we enforce it, or no, once we enable it. They'll receive a prompt saying additional steps need to be taken in order to something.
Right.
I forgot what the exact language is.
There is a little back-end step there. So that concept, the being prompted in Outlook, in Skype, SharePoint, those are all attached to something called Microsoft Modern Authentication.
Right, yes.
And that must be turned on in the tenant beforehand. If not, you will get the app password experience, which I guess we'll talk about. But
yeah, we'll go over that. We'll go at that at the very end, since that's so bad. All right, but back to my computer here. When I click sign in, it's giving me this new sign-in experience and says we've sent a notification to your mobile device. So on my phone, I have the app installed, which we'll go through. I'll click view and I'll click approve. I don't know if anyone can really see it from that far, but the app automatically opened and all I had to do was click approve. And now I'm signed into my account. So for any application that's installed on my computer that requires me to enter in a password for Office 365, I will have to go and do that for each one.
Yes.
And so that's what some people, they find that to be a nuisance. However, there is a 30-day option where you check a box that says don't do this for another 30 days. But what it still does is, I think Ingram touched on it in the last one, it has advanced AI, depending on your license. And it will know your behavior. And if it knows that you're not logging in from Canada, let's say, you spend most of your life in Winter Haven, Florida, then you'll get an alert on your phone saying, do you want this to be approved or not?
Yep.
And so it's running constantly. So even though you haven't turned it on for this specific device to run until 30 days from now, it will still prompt you for any other device.
And any kind of improbable logins and logging in. What if I am in Canada? So I log in Canada, and I've been logging into Canada for 4 days, and then I suddenly log in San Francisco, then Canada again. It's improbable. So there's all kinds of factors that would trigger it to say, I'm just going to ask them to do it real quick.
And so what I'll do now is I'll enable Christy Klein, who I believe I reset the password for. And if not, that should be fun, showing everyone how to reset passwords. So I'll check her, and I'll click enable, and it'll give me another box. And let me copy her email address since it's so long. I don't think it will. I'll have to type it. Sorry, Seth, I'm going to have to type this.
Now, I don't know how much of a deep dive we want to do on what the options are and, kind of what the admin's perspective would be. I guess we're going to be the user then.
Well, why don't you talk about that while I try to sign into this account?
Well, let's sign in and we'll see it from there.
All right, what was it? Christy Klein. I think I actually went to the next page. And I did. There we go. Christy C. But I think it gives you a lot more options than many other multi-factor services in terms of where you can do it from, because most people, I think, will give you a cell phone.
I like that it's all there already, and you have a few options. Right off the bat, there's really no third-party services. It can be enabled, user by user, so you can enable it on high-value targets. You can enable it on, a pilot group, and just really no pressure. It's not an organizational change if you don't want it to be.
Okay, so yes, I reset the password.
All right.
All right. So back on my desktop, if I entered in my email address, I entered in my password, and so now I have this new login screen. And I'll click Set It Up Now, and it'll redirect me into the setup page.
Okay.
So what we ran into was, I'm not sure if these were the same order, but people would not choose. Our preferred method is to use the mobile app and use receive notification for verification.
Right.
So all that is when you're prompted to sign in, your phone will buzz or it'll alert you, and all you have to do is click approve or deny. and then you're good for the next 30 days on that app. But what people were doing was they clicked on the first option, authentication phone. They entered in their phone number, and then they were right. So they were getting phone calls. So they had to get a phone call, and they had to press the pound symbol, and they had to do all these other things instead of just clicking approve.
Right.
And so people would start yelling at me, saying, "Hey, this is too hard. I can't do it." I said, "Yes, but if you would have read the directions," which they didn't. So we made a video which shows how to go through this in the right way.
Now, one of the things that's one of the reasons that's there is having multiple methods of authentication is one of the things that Microsoft likes, and one of the things that I like. I don't like being kind of tied to one method. And you can, for example, let's say you don't have the app or you've lost your phone and you can't generate whatever necessary text to generate that code. By having that recovery number or recovery email or like a recovery landline phone number put in, you can still get in with another method. It doesn't have to be the method that's preferred, but it can be pre-configured.
Right.
So as an admin, you can collect all kind of cell phone numbers for folks and pre-populate before your MFA rollout and pre-populate them as the recovery number. So when the user gets to that step, instead of having to select that number is already there. So it's boom, boom, boom. Put in your text number. Now I'm in. And so at that point, you can walk the user through changing methods, or you can change the method for them if you're going to do it with them. But I like having both methods simply because what if you're somewhere where you have phone signal or you don't, or you don't have data, or I don't want to be in a bind. I don't want to be in a bind where I can't get in. So I use the Authenticator app notification as well. In other organizations, we use the phone call. It didn't bother me all that much, but it really depends on your preferences.
Well, when you're trying to set it up on your phone, that's where it comes in.
Right.
Because the guide happened because I tried all different ways, and I found the most complicated way was, and it sounds like the easiest way. Oh, I just get a phone, I pick up my phone, and I press the pound sign. But while you're trying to get that on your phone, receive the call on your phone, and do it all from your cell phone, it's very difficult.
Right.
So one thing I kind of missed was setting up the actual app on your phone. So that's the one kind of gotcha, the one additional step that we find people, the big issue people have with this step is, now I need to remember the password for my iCloud account or my Android store account.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So you do have to download an app from Microsoft, the authentication app, in order to get this to work. But after that, you literally just scan this. That's included with the app, and
that's a pain point. That's a pain point that is encountered often, which is it takes me a little. I have to do 4 steps, so then I only have 1 step from this day forward. And sometimes people shy away from it, but it's. What would you rather do? Recover data, or spend 3 minutes of your time scanning and downloading an app.
Right, exactly.
But it definitely becomes an obstacle sometimes when, like, what's my iCloud password? I don't know. My signal's terrible. I don't get on the what's the Wi-Fi password? I mean, it can have its drawbacks.
Right. And so, like you said, you do have that secondary method that it makes you choose because, if you lose your cell phone, then you're out of luck. So it does give you that second option. What it also does is it allows you to change your options.
Correct.
So, even though you may like using our preferred method of downloading the app and using the app to authenticate, maybe in the future you may not like that. So you can always go back and in your account settings, you can change your personal preferences on that. So if you want it to ring to your office phone instead of your cell phone, or vice versa, you can make those kind of changes.
You can figure all of them. Why not?
Yeah, so
do all of them.
Yeah, or you could that's right. You can check the box for every single one. So you're not just limited to 2 options. You're really backed up. So if everything goes haywire, you could still get into your.
Always get my
you
email.
can always get in there. So I think that brings us to the thing.
Oh, the app password. The
app password. So talk to us about app passwords and why they exist, and why this is so much better than app passwords.
Why is so much better than app password? Okay. So before the modern authentication concept. I think it's Exchange. I mean, it's Outlook 2013 or newer. SharePoint, Skype for Business. If it's activated in the tenant, there is some information that it says, okay, the user has entered their username and their password, their actual username and their actual password. Using this new technology, it's able to trigger the multi-factor and bring up the acknowledgement window. During that process, but it's very application dependent. So your application must be aware and understand how to utilize modern authentication. And that's a relatively new feature. We really kind of just turned it on when we were doing our part of the project. Before that, we were just relying on app password. Now, this is one of the most complicated things I have to explain. App password is a one-time only visible, randomly generated password that can be entered into applications that do not understand modern authentication. So that's a lot of way of saying you press a button and you'll see a password one time and one time only. You cut it and you paste it into whatever application you're attempting to configure that's going to interact with your 365 data. Then you leave it there and you don't think about it again. What's going to happen is you're going to have your username and an app password. So up until recently, the native Apple Mail client did not understand modern authentication. What it would do is you'd have to put in your email address and an app password. The reason it's only visible once is because it is best practices to keep generating one app password per device. And the reason you'll do that is I'm setting up mail on my non-compliant mobile device, put in my email address and my app password. I am setting up my non-compliant tablet or other version of Office. That's 2 app passwords. And then down the line, whatever's going to be interacting with that 365 account. Now I have 4 or 5 app passwords that are listed and visible within the user account. You can start disable. You can actually disable one specific device one at a time. But the gotcha is you have to go in, grab it. You shouldn't save it. You just copy it and get into that session and then move on.
And what do people end up doing?
They end up copying it and pasting it into a text file and using one app password for 6 applications.
That's right.
That's right.
And so very, very complicated because you can't remember what it is.
You only see it once.
You only see it once. And so you end up putting it in a text file and then looking at it later.
And then looking at it
later. Which defeats the purpose of having
the purpose of the app password, yes.
And so if I could just show, if I can remember off the top of my head. Do you remember where it is?
I do, and it makes no sense where it is.
It's security and privacy.
Security and privacy.
Okay. And then you go to
additional security. Yeah,
all right.
There you go. And then it's
Create.
Update your phone number.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's create and manage app passwords.
Click the top one.
Click the top one?
Yeah. So now here's where you manage all, and then there's app password.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And it's grayed out. People think that it's not an option, but
that's
it
right.
is. It's an option.
It's a different shade of black here. It's not grayed out. It's just a different shade. So if I click on that, I can create a new password. And so what's the purpose of giving it a name?
So again, ideally this would be a one-time use for one instance. So let's say it's Android tablet, Office 365, supported third-party vendor tool, blah, 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 blah. And I would be able to have one app password per each, and then they can be individually deactivated. So I can deactivate one but not break the other.
So if a device you think it's compromised, you can go ahead, sign into your app password list here, and delete it. And then that way the person can't access it even though they have your device. And so yeah, there's the randomly generated password here. How many characters is that?
It's gotten longer.
Has it? All right, and so because I didn't copy it down, I have to delete this and start again. Right.
So if you were to say I've lost my Surface, and I understand that it's set to hold on to my authentication for 30 days. Mm-hmm. Whatever mechanism you've put in place to get in it, this could be deleted, and now it stops communicating. Right. Now it's no longer authenticated.
Now, I know at least a couple months ago, modern authentication had to be turned on by your admin. Is that still the case?
Still the case.
Still the case.
That I've seen.
Yeah. Which is upsetting because modern authentication, the thing that lets you use the apps for your devices and your apps, is so much easier.
Yeah, it is. It is easier.
And so I would think that they would just turn that on by default. But
yeah, there's a whole kind of web concept of how these work together. You turn on your MFA, you turn on your objects, and you turn on modern authentication. Then you turn on if you were synchronizing your local Active Directory with 365, you can turn on what's called seamless single sign-on. And then the experience becomes really great. I'm a new user. I'm setting up Outlook. I launch Outlook. It sees my local Active Directory credential. I see a brief flash of the authentication. I do nothing. It's basically doing it all on its own as long as it's all been configured. It's got a few little switches you have to turn, but it's really leaps and bounds ahead of where it was. It's much easier than, again, the app password, which until maybe middle of last year was how you were destined to set up your 5 devices.
Right. And it also gets rid of the need of having that 90-day password policy where you're constantly having to come up with a new password. And I think that's where this all came from. Is
Yes.
in order to have a secure environment, you would have to have some sort of password policy where your password would be changed at some interval.
Right.
And
password history then, so that kind of ties into the password history. So I change my password every 90 days, and I have a password history of 5 passwords. That means every year, right? It's fall. This is my fall password.
Right. And so people would, and Ingram, said it on the last live stream, people would just add an additional character at the end of it. So it's not really making it any more secure. Right. And of course, if that's not an option, if it makes you change it to something, something hardcore, people would just write it down and put it on a post-it.
Right, yeah.
So this definitely more secure just to use modern authentication and using the mobile app. So that's all I had to say today.
Okay.
Do you think we covered it?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. It's a concept that's been, like I said, it's been around for a while. You have so many options. It can call your cell phone. It could text you. It could generate the notice on your phone. You can open up the notification app, the actual Microsoft app, and type in the number. That's something that people are very used to in the banking industry. It's there for you. I mean, it's really lets you have different comfort levels. It can be enabled user by user. It's a great tool. It's available with every license type. You can use it for, like I said, your high value targets. You can use it for your problematic targets, right?
Right.
The people who are prone to compromise, that can be enabled just for them. So it gives you a great deal of flexibility and added value as it's already there.
Right, because as we saw in the beginning, not everyone was enabled. We got to choose exactly who it was.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think we'll end it there. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Alrighty.
And thank you all for joining us today as well. Join us every Tuesday and Thursday at 2:30 p.m. to see another live stream where we'll tackle another topic. And thank you to our clients who make these videos possible.